Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Medical Technologies session. This time we will dedicate to the Transition Challenge full-scale micro-nano-bio devices for medical and medical research applications. I am here today with Enrique Claverol, the program manager for medical technologies, and he will explain you more about this challenge. We have just had a session on an accelerator topic, where I also gave an introduction to the European Innovation Council. And in this presentation, I would like to do that just very briefly. Enrique, can you go to the next slide? So let me start with the agenda of this session now. So I will do a 5 minutes welcome. Then Enrique Claverol, he will explain more about the full-scale micro-nano-bio devices for medical and medical research application transition challenge. We will have a lot of opportunity for answering questions. So please put your questions in the Slido that we have at sly.do with the hashtag challenges. There you can put any question that you have, and we will answer it then during this session. Finally, at 5 to 5, or when the question and answer session is over, we will close the session. Please, next one. So this slide shows an overview of the whole work program of the European Innovation Council. You can see that we have 3 main instruments. We have Pathfinder, we have Transition, and we have Accelerator. Enrique will briefly explain what they are if you don't know what it is. But each of these instruments, they have an open part to which you can apply on any topic related to deep tech in health, digital or green transition technologies. And there is a part which is top-down, which is designed by the program managers and which are the so-called challenges. So Pathfinder has half of its budget dedicated to open and challenges, transition as well, and accelerator also. And here now during this session, we will talk about the transition topic, medical micro-nano-bio devices, which you can see. So at the right-hand side, you see all the challenges that we have in the work program. And if you don't know, but we just had the info session on the accelerator topic, aerosol and surface decontamination. So this is a very brief introduction to the European Innovation Council. And with this, I want to hand over to Enrique.
Thank you. First of all, well, thank you, Anne-Marie, but also, sorry, Marco, not Margot, Georgina, is a typo there. Sorry, Marco. So Marco is a colleague from the transition unit, and he has many years of experience in that area, and in particular within the agency. He knows everything there is to know about the operational aspects of proposal submission, evaluation, monitoring within the transition unit. So I thought it was a good idea to have a colleague, or Marco in particular, to help me during the presentation. So I'm Enrique Claverol. I'm the Medical Technologies Program Manager. And there is this little disclaimer I use often. I bring in some ideas about my vision of the market, the challenges faced by the technologies in the projects that we run and in the proposals we receive. And all these views, this vision is my personal vision. So it's not necessarily the Commission's opinion. It's a vision based on my experience and my observation of the market and the state-of-the-art technology. The first thing I will do is I will position the challenge, which is a transition challenge, in the context of the agency. I'm sorry if this is not new to you. It's always difficult for us to know if the audience has a lot of background context about the agency. So I prefer to go over this every time and then everybody's on the same page. But I apologize to the rest if you've heard this several times. So the EIC was created to bring, let me turn on the pointer. It was created to bring science to market. So our KPI, our goal is to see how many technologies we can bring to the patient and to the clinic, and whether those companies or those technologies that we create in Europe with our support, the support of the agency, whether those technologies are market leaders, because it means they have contributed tremendously to the field if they are positioned at the top. So this is what we want to do. We bring technologies to the clinic and to the patient, that's to the market. So we have a structure, the funding programs in 3 stages, Pathfinder, Transition, and Accelerator. And that evolves, that pipeline evolves from early stage to very mature projects. The topic of the presentation today is transition, but let me give you a bit of context about Pathfinder and Accelerator so you can position your proposal in that context. That will help you design it in a way that's aligned to what we're looking for and the evaluators are looking for. So Pathfinder is where a research consortium invents a new technology. We assume that the science has been set up already and a Pathfinder proposal decides to use the existing science to create the core part of a future product. The core technology, what gives value to that product, that's developed within Pathfinder. So Pathfinder is the engine of invention within our pipeline. For those projects in Pathfinder, we also request, and we will be persevering and intensifying this take, that those Pathfinder projects should have a focus on a real user need. In our case, in MedTech, it's a patient, it's a clinician, maybe it's pharma, but there must be a very clear user need. Now, the goal of the Pathfinder projects is to reach the end with a proof of concept. And in the context of MedTech, from my end, a proof of concept is a device that is hand-soldered, hand-wired. It's ugly in many ways, if you allow me to say that. And nobody in the private sector will yet be ready to invest in it. However, this is obviously the core or a very important technology that could be delivered to the market in the future. And that core technology should have demonstrated the basic functionality. So if it diagnostics, a basic diagnostic power, if it's therapeutic, a basic therapeutic power, and there should be some indication that it's possible to make it safe or that it's safe already at the Pathfinder level. So safety and efficacy should be kind of visible, even if it's an early stage, ugly version of the product. We know the private investors will not come in and co-invest or lead an investment round because this is too early stage. But at the end of Pathfinder, some technologies look like ready for the next stage, which is not yet private investment in general. And that's why my colleagues invented Transition. Transition is a bridge funding opportunity. We assume that if you go into Transition, it's only and only because you have already tested the core technology. It's there, it's on the bench, it's in the lab. But when you talk to investors, they say, no, I pass. And typically that's why, and the reason why that happens is because your device cannot be tested in the clinic yet, or it's not compact enough, or the price tag is too high, or the materials you used are research-based, they're not medical grade. Maybe your preclinical data is not enough to demonstrate that it will work in the clinic, that the clinical data set will be there to create a technical file and get CE marking. There are always things missing when you finish Pathfinder. So the agency created the concept of transition, and this is a 2.5 million grant, bridge funding that increases the readiness for investment. And you have 2-3 years to refine the technology that you are supposed to already have. And this is really, really critical. The only way for us to help you get to the market within the time span of transition and accelerator that comes next, I'll mention this in a while, is if you enter transition only when and only if you are ready. And that's, again, it's the core PCB, the core microfluidics chip, the core microfluidics reader, actuators already sitting on the bench and working, but not ready to convince venture capital. That's the stage where you can make it through transition. And of course, that's because after that, we want to inject your project, if possible, into transition, into accelerator. So to be ready for accelerator, at the end of transition, you should have a product that looks investable. Again, accelerator is about reaching the market. We will offer you 2.5 million grant plus an investment of up to 15 million. But that big step can only happen if you find co-investors at the level of accelerator. So if you reach accelerator, if you finish transition, and you're not ready for the venture capital industry to co-invest with us, you will have a hard time trying to get into our accelerator phase. So it's very important that you see the transition in that context. When you think, okay, is my project ready for transition? Will this make a good accelerator project in the future? One suggestion, very, very pragmatic, I wanted to make is that you look at the previous EIC beneficiaries. You can look at previous projects in various ways. You can go to Cordis. There's an impact report for the EIC where you will see some projects described. Maybe the impact report is the most readable first way of listening about projects. But I would suggest you look at the EIC list of beneficiaries in Accelerator to give you an idea also for transition. We understand transition is earlier, so don't worry about that. This is clear in our mind. Still, you should see, and the jury should see, and the experts should see that if you submit your transition idea in 2 or 3 years, it should be ready for the leak of accelerators. And so if you go to our website and under accelerator, you will find the projects that my colleagues are supporting at every cutoff. And if you pull down that list of beneficiaries and you investigate a little bit those companies, you will see the kind of level of maturity that you need within, say, a couple of years, if you start transition now, to get into the largest investment we can make jointly with the private sector. So that's a tip for you to see what we're looking for downstream in the pipeline. Of course, the transition project should be high tech because as a public agency, we focus on covering the funding gap for high tech, high risk. There should be a nice market product fit. We will repeat this in future slides. I would also suggest that you talk to the NCPs. This is a wonderful network of experts. We've been working with them continuously. They've been in the business of supporting proposals for many years, and they have seen multiple rounds of transitions. And so in addition to what I'm telling you today and my colleague Marco, they also have a lot of background. They can transfer a lot of information to you to guide you. Just a brief note, it's particularly interesting to look at transition this year because in previous years, it was more restricted. Only projects from a given number of programs could apply. But this year, if you have a project funded under Horizon 2020 or European Horizon Europe, these are good for transition. You can apply. So it has been broadened quite a lot. So any project from H2020 or Horizon Europe, you can apply. There is a time window, though. It's actually mentioned here. So if the project you have, say, a Pathfinder project, has just started, so typically we feel that's too early. Conceptually, it doesn't make much sense that a project that has just started in Pathfinder already claimed that Pathfinder was successful and they got a proof of concept. So a little bit of a constraint was hardwired in the work program. So if the project has been going on for at least 12 months, then you can apply. But also be careful that if the project is too old and it's defined in the work program as 24 months, so if your project finished more than 24 months before the deadline for transition submission, then it cannot be submitted. It's considered too far back in history. So it has to be within that sweet spot. The project is running but approaching the end, or maybe it finished a few months ago after 24, and now you realize there's an opportunity there. The core technology was developed, and now you need to go for exploitation with transition to wrap up a little bit that development. Please, Marco, I didn't mention this, but don't hesitate. Come in at any point in time if you want to add anything, or forget something, or correct anything. One of the questions that comes up from time to time is, can an entity who wasn't involved in a project, in a Pathfinder project or Horizon project, submit a transition? And the answer is yes. The typical way to do that is this entity needs to connect, talk to a participant in the project that generated the technology. And this entity who will submit the transition needs to have some kind of commitment from the owner of the IP, the know-how, the deliverable in the previous project that triggers the submission of the transition. But again, the organization that submits a transition doesn't have to be a partner in the previous project, but it needs to talk to the owner and get acceptance, authorization to submit the transition. Briefly, again, just to insist on the same concept, this is extremely important for the agency that the projects you submit to transition have already completed a proof of concept. The transition is not to continue research, it's to say, okay, research was done, the technological development got to the point where we can call this a proof of concept. And your negotiation with the jury members, your discussion with the jury members, will be to demonstrate, to some extent, to demonstrate that you are at the right maturity level. There will be other aspects that we can mention later on, but that will be a strong aspect. You need to demonstrate you're there, you're ready. The safety, the efficacy is already proven, even if it's at the lab level. Yes, one of the questions that come up often is, well, we know we are offering the opportunity to be part of the transition, even if you were not a partner in the project. But then the question that comes up often is, how do you, an entity who wasn't in the project, connect with partners in the previous project? Or if you were a scientist in a previous project, but you're not really interested in exploitation, but you see the potential there, how do you connect with SMEs or entrepreneurs that can push the project into transition? And here we launch some ideas. I mean, very often, if you're working in an area, you kind of know who could be your person or your entity to lead a transition. Sometimes it will be, somebody in the tech transfer office or somebody at tech transfer knows, or a local company you've been interacting with for some projects, but not particularly with this project. There are other options. You can have a look at the list of eligible projects if you are an entity who wants to submit a transition project, but you were not part of a project in the past. We could look at the eligible projects. You have the Cordis website where you can read about the projects. You have the Innovation Radar. And there is a link in the presentation. ERC has also some information online, so you can read about projects that were successful. Read about the deliverables and say, look, I want to bring this to market. And you can, in that way, connect to what the ERC did. Yeah, so once you've found an interesting innovation that you think could be the core of a transition proposal, it's again good to talk to the NCPs. We keep insisting on this. The NCPs are a network with a lot of knowledge, and they can guide you a lot. And because of the volume of proposals, sometimes it works very, very well as a first contact, in addition to contacting us. The more sources of information you have, the better. And MCPs are a very good source of information. You need to contact the owners of the technology. If you are in an organization who wants to submit a transition, but we're not part of the project, you contact the owner of the technology, and you try to align with this owner. You're trying to bring the technology to the market, and you try to find the middle ground with this owner. What do they want? How can they transfer the rights to you now or in the future? Is this a patent they need to license? You could license it now. You could make it conditional on the project being successful, on the proposal being successful. All these options have pros and cons. If you're not an owner or a licensee of the technology, of course, perhaps the jury members or the expert evaluators could claim it's not very clear that they will reach an agreement because they haven't signed the agreement yet. So it's a good idea to have some kind of agreement already in place. And the more solid it is, in general, the better. The more credible it is, your path to the market. Maybe Marco, you want to explain a bit the time frame of the multiple stages. I think this could be useful for the audience.
Thank you, Enrique, and good afternoon, all. Yes, essentially, you will be able to submit your proposal in two cutoff dates this year in 23. Most important is that you start by checking the eligibility, as it was mentioned by Enrique. You can apply in the funding and tenders portal there. So your proposal will be evaluated by three experts in remote settings, and this will be done within 9 weeks. This is the first step of the EIC transition evaluation. And the second step, if successful at the first step, you will be invited to an interview with jury members, very similarly to what is happening with Accelerator. Jury members are up to 6. Only people mentioned in the proposal can be invited as to pitch their proposal in front of the jury members and answer the questions. Normally, after 4 weeks, you will be informed of the outcome of this second step. So altogether, it's approximately 4 months, the evaluation. The following 2 months are for the grant agreement preparation. So the entire process from cutoff until the grant agreement is signed will normally last 6 months. So most important is that you will be expected to start your proposal, to start the project shortly after the signature of the project. This normally is 2 or 3 months. We make this because it's essentially not a research project. This is the moment you need to start running towards the market. So if you're not ready for that, to start the project immediately after you sign the grant, consider applying for a later cutoff. I think this is all.
Very good. Thank you so much, Marco. Thanks so much for that. So let's move on to the next slide. So now I start talking a bit about the specific call, the reason for us being here today. So the call is Micro-Nano-Bio devices. So I gave you a bit of background how this topic came about. So this topic came about after discussions with DG Connect. DG Connect and many other parts of the Commission for many years had been funding lab-on-a-chip, microfluidics, many of them with surface functionalization. This is the nano part in the title. These kind of devices, we've all seen them for quite a number of years. And one of the main observations is that although very often these projects led to a benchtop system, sometimes relatively bulky, with lines, fluid lines connecting multiple modules, sample preparation in a semi-automated way, some chips with some sensors and actuators, including microfluidics, maybe some data analysis. The system very often at the end of those projects was sitting on the bench, but it wasn't ready to go to market. And we've seen in many cases, and we shared this with colleagues at DG Connect and other parts of the Commission, very often that point was the end point for many of these projects. They stayed at this research level. They never moved to market. So after this discussion with DG Connect and other colleagues and other organizations within the Commission, we realized there was an opportunity for a micro-nano-bio devices transition call, specifically transition call. There has been so much developed and not so much brought to the patient, to the market in general. We think the opportunity is there. So let's go into the text very briefly. So the call text starts the technologies at the intersection of microelectronics, nanotechnology, biosensing, microfluidics, analytics. So you can see this is very broad. We deliberately wanted to keep it very broad. They have demonstrated a great potential where high throughput, scalability, miniaturization, automation are required for increasingly complex clinical and R&D tasks. Previously completed projects funded by our EU programs have succeeded in many cases in advancing the state of the art of the micro-nano-bio systems to unprecedented technical attributes, often achieving experimental proof of concept with validation in the lab, yet transitioning these developments into the market-ready full device, addressing high-impact user needs, because that's always critical. Sometimes we've seen scientifically very interesting microfluidics and sensors that have a very interesting scientific base, but not obvious, or maybe it was obvious there could be a need, but flesh wasn't put on the bone about how to move that device into the user and make it attractive for the end user. So there must be a clear high impact user need, a market opportunity, or cost benefit balance, for example, and novel usability features so that the market desires that core technology that you developed in a previous European project. That has been rare, I think, and this is the common thinking in the Commission and DG Connect in particular. So opportunities for impact are plenty, abound. In the research lab, new tools are needed, for example, to better understand infection, age-related degeneration, to trigger and control tissue regeneration, cell reprogramming for repair, to uncover and harness complex metabolic processes, inflammation, and many others. So here in this sentence, we're actually saying is the device could be targeting a research market. There are companies in Europe and everywhere who target research scientists as the main user. So why not? This is what we're trying to say in this sentence. Look, we are open to that. It doesn't have to be necessarily, diagnostics. It doesn't have to be necessarily production of a molecule in pharma. It could be targeting a research opportunity. Thinking about this, sequencing originally was a tool for research and still is a main market for, Illumina's technology, for example. So we don't want to constrain too much the opportunities that you send us. Micro-nano-bio technologies will be instrumental in tackling colossal challenge of uncovering yet unknown functions of interrelations in the massive data sets offered by today's omics technologies. So here, big data, we see a lot of opportunity in the omics space where these micro-nano-bio devices generate lots of data. So there could be a data analysis component that would be perfectly reasonable. It doesn't have to be just the micro-nano-bio aspect. You probably should have some data analysis to extract as much as you can, to automate as much as you can around big data. So general purpose enabling technologies such as on-demand benchtop DNA or protein synthesis printing, programmable microfluidics are becoming a reality. Now, in the clinic, and that's the other area we also want to mention, we are open to, in the clinic, lab automation remains of fundamental importance. So here, the potential user could be a clinician. It could be a lab in the clinical setting. It doesn't have to be a researcher in academia or a research center. It could be a clinic. So remains of fundamental importance, the automation, lab automation, with a trend towards decreasing sample volumes, scaling up multiplex architectures to realize comprehensive diagnostics panels, enabling benchtop and point of care use. Again, we introduce here the possibility of point of care. Again, it doesn't have to be a system that's used only in the clinic. It could be a point of care device. We've seen many projects funded by the Commission over this 2-3 year window that tackle POCs, the old classic challenge of point of care diagnostics. And we haven't seen that many yet getting to the patient. So we think there's an opportunity. And this point of care, by the way, could be home use or could be a practitioner's office. That's perfectly acceptable in the context of this call. Stratification of patients is one possible application, just one that would seem reasonable in the context of the call. Also, workflows in therapy discovery. So we realized that these micro-nano-bio systems could be used by pharma as well. So we've talked about different potential target customers. It could be the clinician, it could be the user who uses this at home, it could be a researcher in academia, but it could be already also pharma. So what we say here is workflows in therapy discovery must be further streamlined with animal-free validation of effectiveness and toxicity, relying on in vitro models of disease. So physiologically realistic constructs should be suitable for analysis over adequate time spans, providing multimodal observations and large data sets. So in a quite convoluted way, we are talking about organ on a chip. And we've seen many of these projects in the programs funded by the Commission. So that's a possibility as well. You could have an organ on a chip that has an application in replacing animal use for drug discovery, and it hasn't really made it to pharma, to the market. So maybe it's an opportunity for you. So the scope of the challenge is the maturation of micro-nano biotechnologies. This is really critical, absolutely critical for transition. It's just the maturation. Again, we realize that if you enter transition too soon, and we've seen this, then you cannot complete the cycle of, in 2 or 3 years maximum, getting that technology ready for a private investor to come in and co-invest with us at the level of accelerator. That's our objective, that in 2 or 3 years you polish what you already have to the level that we can come in with an equity investment and be joined by private investors. So the goal, to be more specific, is to realize and validate a fully functional, integrated micro-nano-bio device or system. We don't want to be too restrictive there. Are we talking about just a device like a chip? Or it could be a full system, benchtop system. Maybe it could be a combination, a cartridge plus a system. All those are acceptable. We want to keep an open mind and capture the best opportunities. So we are very flexible. So focus again. I'm sorry I'm so persistent with this, but this is critical for you to be successful and for us to be successful in creating our pipeline of medtech. Focus is on integration and or refinement. And I'm creating with you some possibilities for this. It could be miniaturization, it could be a scaling production, it could be some further validation, preclinical, it may be some clinical validation already. You name it, there are other options. But it has to be just this final refinement, what you can do with 2.5 million in a couple of years, and then quickly start looking for your private co-investors who will co-invest with us. Within the time span of the project, within that time span of the project, your project should become investment ready. So here I go back in the call text just to be very clear. Here you see 3 bullet points, and these are essentially telling you we are open to broadly define target user pool. First one I mentioned here is the acceleration of the discovery of principles underlying cell pathogen biology by means of advanced micro or millifluidics or mini fluidics, like complex 3D flows, organs or body on chip, nanopores, nanocavities. This paragraph here is telling you if your technology targets a research market, we don't limit this, it's possible. I have to make one comment though, to your advantage. What we've seen sometimes, particularly with investors that participate in juries, is that they tend to associate a research market to a small market. This is not always true. I've cited some examples in the context of sequencing, DNA profiling. Some of those markets are essentially research markets, but still large and economically sustainable. But be aware of this. You have to demonstrate very clearly that if your project targets a researcher as the end user, you have to make it clear to the jury members that this is a good economic opportunity, not just an evolution of our research product without a big market. You should clearly state and demonstrate with evidence, and this could be comparing to other products, looking at previous M&A opportunities, what has happened in the market. So if somebody competing in that space but doing something different, a good exit, for example, that's very convincing. Or if a company is growing fast in revenue, it's still a private company, it's not traded, but they're growing in revenue, and the industry experts do state they're growing in revenue, that's good evidence. But be aware of this. It's a research technology, demonstrate there is a big market. Second paragraph here, automation. We've discussed this in the previous paragraph. Lab automation, clinical applications, stratification, therapy optimization, follow-up of therapy, miniaturization of assays, this type of clinical applications. Again, point of care or not point of care, clinic use, those are good, those are acceptable. And finally, therapy discovery. Again, this is also open to pharma targeted technologies. And we add here artificial intelligence, machine learning, which is very timely nowadays. So we think there's a lot of value in the data analysis in addition to having the device itself. And making the data understandable by your end user, sometimes it's a make it or break it point. If it's very clear to the user, because there's a good data analysis module, it might be easier for you. And it might be easier for you to demonstrate to the jury members that there is a lot of commercial value and social value in your invention. Well, this is just a formalin, really. Expected outcome is to deliver micro-nano-bio systems to the next level of maturity. Well, we want to position Europe within this market at the top. You can imagine that already. It's important for us that you keep an eye on the ethics aspects, safety, of course, sustainability. It would be wonderful if you could have a look at these two, because it's a growing concern, particularly in the medical field, that single-use devices are fashionable in a way because the cost of electronics has dropped, but then that generates a sustainability issue that's becoming more and more important as we reach a difficult tipping point in this context. So circularity, if you could consider that into the proposal, I think it adds value to the proposal. Gender specificity, we are very aware of the need to make sure that all technologies we develop target, male, female, equally. Remember, Marco can add a lot more to this. Remember that we provide a maximum of 2.5 million euros as a grant. So this is non-dilutive. If you're a company, we don't take shares at this stage. The investment would come if you go into Accelerator and you're successful. But in transition, it's non-dilutive. It's a grant. Duration 1 to 3 years seems appropriate. We set up a low bar of 0.5 million because operationally it's very difficult to manage very, very small projects. but typically most of them approach the maximum 2.5 million in terms of requested grant. And we cover 100% of the eligible costs. I wanted to mention very briefly the active management. So once the project is funded, you will hear from us quite a lot, and this is added value in the EIC compared to maybe other programs. So we have overseas trade fair visits, we have opportunities to network with investors, we have synergies, we have events, workshops in which you can connect with other projects within the portfolio, and you can share your solutions, you can share your problems and listen to their solutions. A typical case is, for example, CE marking. The regulatory framework has been tough for European startups in medtech, and one of the areas where we see more value in facilitating that you talk to others in the portfolio is in terms of the CE marking. So we have these synergy events running in the medtech portfolio, and they are working very well. We are preparing a CE marking webinar and some support on our EIC platform. So stay tuned, because that's an opportunity for you as well to get more than the funding. And something that typically is perceived with a lot of value is myself as a program manager, I look at your project as it evolves. And my priority is to help you move on to the next stage as soon as possible, because that's in everybody's interest. That's in the interest of the patient, the agency, in your interest. So the PM will come in and have a look at how you're doing and try to help you push your project to the next stage. We are here to help. There's no policing involved from the PM end. We are there to help you move on and network in the industry as well. So that's something you will get from us. It's interesting, and thanks so much, Marco and other colleagues, for creating this information that comes from the transition unit. Do you want Marco to maybe talk about this feedback from jury members? Because I think this comes directly from your team. Do you want to elaborate on this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Enrique, for this. Well, the feedback we are receiving from jury members is sometimes the current and expected TRL at the end of the projects are not always clear. This is something that is really important. We are seeing more and more projects that are not yet ready to enter transition. So technical milestone in this context also are very important then for monitoring the project. One element in the context of proactive management is that with EIC transition, you will have very frequent meeting with us, not necessarily together with an expert, but every 6 months we are having a conversation with you of approximately 2 hours, asking an update on the progress of the work, suggesting coaching, suggesting other business acceleration services, support from ecosystem partners, participations to event, to workshops, and so on. And also, we will start commenting on your market analysis and sometimes a draft business plan or business model. So these are the feedback from the jury members. Next, please. Yes, these are the major weaknesses that no-go proposal encountered. One, the biggest is the lack of understanding of a market and competition. When submitting for EIC transition, it's important that you have a general understanding of what the problem you're willing to solve is, and how big is this problem, who is already solving this problem, and this essentially the size of the market that you are willing to enter. Yeah, next, please. Major strengths, what we are seeing is that the technology, this deep tech aspect is something that is very much appreciated by the jury members. And when present, the team is a major strength. Next, please. Overall, these are the numbers that occurred in 2022. The second September cutoff result have just been released. There were 34 proposals suggested for funding. Now we are in the process of preparing the grant agreement, and therefore the success rate is next to 19% for this. I think this is all. Yes, these are the links for the work program and the recording of General Info Day of 13 of December 22.
And that's it. Yes, this is
yeah, that's it.
Oh, national points.
Yeah, very important.
And that's it. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing, and perhaps we could go into the Q&A. Thanks so much, Marco, for the explanation and for the data. That data set is really interesting. Thanks so much. Okay, so is it better to establish a startup based on the project results during Pathfinder, or better do it during transition? We get this question quite a lot, right, Marco? I mean, usually my answer, we don't pre-specify that they have to create a company. Right? They can go into transition without having a company yet. So there are advantages and disadvantages, no, in both. I think in practice is really common sense. If you're ready to create a company and you might have some pre-seed funding already, it might make sense. If it's too early, then it will be too obvious. It's too soon. No? Marco, do you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes it's too early because also the maturation of the technology have an impact on the capacity to raise funds. So
yes,
that is critical. Absolutely.
So both options are possible. That's the answer. Thank you for the question. Yeah. Why should I apply to EIC instead of ERC? Does it minimize my chances if I apply for both? These are unrelated. I mean, you could, if you're a researcher at the ERC level, you can apply to ERC, and you, of course, you cannot apply for funding for the same project from two entities. I suppose this was not part of the question, but you cannot apply for funding to do the same thing to EIC and ERC if it's exactly the same thing. But things are complementary, different aspects. ERC is more basic research. It's not really to support transition to accelerator, whereas EIC is more market focused. I think these are complementary opportunities.
Yes, I think that the the applicant is referring to ERC POC. ERC POC is 150,000 euro. It's given at the end of a EIC grant. In that case, the ERC POC helps to explore sometimes the market, helps to sometimes also to create the company, and then afterwards join the EIC, submit a proposal to EIC Transition, and yeah, this is a path that we are seeing. Actually, if you are applying to EIC Transition Open, you need to have an eligible project. Only for EIC Transition Challenge, you can apply from any H2020 and Horizon Europe project.
Okay, very good, thanks. What are the application success rates? Well, you just discussed, you said 19%, right? In the
yes, between 14 and 20% is the usual success rate in EIC transition we are seeing.
Thank you, Marco. Can you go for transition if you're a researcher envisioning a startup at the end of transition, but you are still lacking some profiles for the founding team? Sure, you can try, and in many cases, I think Marco would agree. We see that academics do not have an executive team already. They just finished a Pathfinder or a ERC project, and they might have an SME that has been part of the project, but maybe they don't even have that SME yet. It's possible, but I think it's common sense to think that you're competing. It's a competitive process, so you need to think, are you at the right time to create the structure so you can offer that already at the time of proposal submission. If you wait, it might be less risky for you in the sense that you don't invest time if you then don't get the funding from us or the private sector. But at the same time, if you don't bring those people with expertise around you and you show that in the proposal, you're decreasing a bit the value, and it's kind of common sense. So it's up to you. I would say the more solid you can make the next step, the better. But you have to gauge, balance the effort you put in and what you can get out of this.
Yeah.
In terms of evaluating panels, can one expect challenges to be composed of jury members which are more familiar with a particular topic versus the open call?
Yes, definitely. We strive to have the 6 jury members that have both a significant research and experience, but also product development, research in industry. Sometimes they are founders or even investors, but this dual competence, having spent time in research or having a significant technical expertise in the field.
Yes.
For transition. Yeah.
Yes. No, I do find some jury members very, very much right in the topic. Sometimes you also will find generalists. I think for the proposer, you have to approach this as a typical VC, round of visits to VCs. You will find VCs who are really, really, really knowledgeable, and maybe they even went into the same market segment and they know a lot. Sometimes even too much, right? You're fighting with them to demonstrate you have a space. And sometimes you will find generalists. I think you will find a bit of everything. It's difficult to anticipate because there are so many different topics covered by the call. So I think it's fair to say you might find a bit of everything, which it's fine, it's totally reasonable. So be ready for that. Design your proposal and your jury interview with the possibility that you have very expert jury member who knows a lot about the segment, but then also try to convince the generalists because they might come from finance and they're not experts in that area. So there will be a bit of everything possible. Prepare for that. I think it makes sense. The challenge focuses strongly on an integrated device. Are only technologies that are developed as a single physical object benchtop eligible? Well, not necessarily. I mean, we try to extract value from Micro-Nano-Bio projects in the past, and this could be a multi-module kind of technology. It doesn't have to be one device that I can hold in my hand that integrates everything. Integration typically sounds to investors as something portable, lower weight, more opportunities in the market, but not necessarily. And in fact, when I was thinking about the clinical application, I was thinking about machines and maybe a cartridge if you need the reagents in a cartridge. No, it doesn't have to be, small integrated. It could be bigger. There's another thought to discuss is whether if you mean depending on products from other providers, is that possible or not? I think it's possible, but again, there are pros and cons. If your technology needs other technologies from other providers, then maybe it could be seen as a risk or maybe as an opportunity. If you have like a joint venture with somebody and they have the channel to market and the module that's complementary to you, maybe that gives you an opportunity. I mean, it depends. It's a case-by-case thing. Okay. What do you mean by safety in the specific conditions for the challenge? Well, typically what I have in mind is a proof of concept is a device that has some indication that the next stage would not fail. And it's convincing to everybody. And that usually means the functionality is there. So if it's a therapeutic functionality, you have some preclinical data in animal models or in vitro that shows that. If it's an organ on a chip, you look at the data you've published and your patents, and there's some preliminary data suggesting the main feature works, whatever that feature is. And you usually think, well, if it touches humans, you want it to be safe. If the POC works in an animal model, but it will never make it to the clinic, which is your target, because safety will never be there, or at least not within 3 years, I wouldn't think that would be a project for transition, because I think the jury members, the experts will immediately see that that safety is not there, it will never be there. So that's my take on safety. We aim to commercialize our technology into a service, rather than a single device we intend to sell to customers. That's perfectly okay. The problem with services is always the same. You know how these things go. VCs don't like services. They think they're not scalable. They imagine that a service to be scalable means increasing headcount, and they always get out of the deal. But this might be changing now. You know, with AI, scalability in service-based products, it could be run of the mill very soon. So maybe there is an edge there. Scalability, if you go for a service, demonstrate the scalability. I think this will come up in the discussion. Scalability, scalability, scalability. Are jury members more technical, business, or policy makers? Maybe Marco, you can elaborate on that.
Well, I can make a comparison with the accelerator. Our jury members are more technical than the jury members in accelerator, but still they are not only scientific jury members.
Yes. TRL ranges. What TRL ranges are EIC transition proposal expected to have at start and at end of the project? Do you want to take that one, Marco?
Yes, the EIC transition proposal needs to have at least 3, but better TRL 4 to start, and needs to end towards 5 or better 6. So these are the TRL that should be covered in a EIC transition project.
Is a device consumable eligible which facilitates microvascularization or microfluidics in full thickness 3D in vitro test models? Well, why not? If there is a market for it, this would belong to the family of products targeting a research. Probably if you're talking about organ on a chip and you want to improve vascularization in that organ on a chip, why not? There could be a great advantage in that particular market. If vascularization is better, you have to demonstrate there is an opportunity for that. Yes, this is in vitro test, so I assume that's what you have in mind. Yes, why not? What should be the financial maturity of the main applicant?
Okay.
This is the main, no, Mark?
Yeah, I can take yes. This. Well, the applicant of EIC transition in terms of financial maturity is any. Of course, financial capacity will be assessed during the grant agreement preparation. So what does it mean? If you end, for example, your ERC POC with a startup with limited headcount and limited capital, you might not be financial capable. There are exceptions in the sense that the hierarchy might grant anyway, confirmed that the grant will be signed. But it's better if you come with a company that is a startup that has, for example, sufficient capital. And I might mean for a 2.5 million, might needed few $100,000 of capital.
Very good. Multiple projects, multiple proposals to a single challenge. Is that allowed? I think it is allowed. No, Mark, I've seen this in the past.
Yes, it is possible. There shouldn't be competing proposals stemming from the same result, like two teams that are planning the same application from the same research results. This shouldn't be the case, because the jury might actually penalize one or the other. there can be, and there has been in the past, projects that are stemming from the same research results, but in different applications for radical different markets and also different products. So this is possible.
Yes. And the next question is similar, no? Can two different proposals be submitted to the same cutoff from the same initial funded project? I think, Marco, what you said is
yes, it's possible, but there needs to be a logic into this.
Yes, perfect. If you already, if you already acquired funding elsewhere and are in the sweet spot of your transition system, not H2020 or similar, are you then eligible to ask for funding? If I understand correctly, yes.
Yes, but not to do the same things. When you are submitting a EIC transition proposal, you are putting forward activities and a plan of task. So these activities and tasks cannot be funded by another EU-funded source. Can be funded by other sources, private investment. In that case, you might cover those activities with our grants and then use the other money for other, but not two EU-funded sources covering the same task or activity.
Yes. What amounts, types of data do you consider as big data? That's a difficult question. It depends on the application. Yeah. I think that in the context of omics, you have a good reference in sequencing, DNA sequencing data, and that sort of volume. But I don't think the size of the data set is really what I meant as my main, my core idea is that if you automate the data analysis, irrespective of the amount of data you're dealing with, and you show you can present the data in a way that's clearly useful to the user, I think that adds value. I think it will make it easier for you to communicate the value to the investors and then to sell the product. But it doesn't have to be like a huge data set. I mean, you don't have to deal with 100 million patients and their clinical records. This is not what I had in mind, what we had in mind writing the call text. So don't worry too much about the actual size of the data set. Is a nanoparticle-based drug delivery device eligible? Well, there is a nano component clearly there. And if there is a device which is more than nano, well, it matches some aspects of the call. Why not? It's true that if you push, I understand the question, if you push a lot the Micro-Nano-Bio and you take just the nano, you could go anywhere you wanted. You could go to pharma, and this could be a molecule or a new molecular entity or biological because it's nano, right? If that's a question, I don't think this will fly, but because it doesn't deliver the value we want to extract. It's a complexity of the system, the nanofluidics, microsensor, maybe some electrochemistry. That's where we've seen the value that hasn't been realized. Whereas if it's just a pure nanoparticle, maybe we've seen, already examples of the value being realized. So I would try to have more in this project, not just the nano, maybe the micro and the sensors and the actuators and so forth. Is a proposal eligible if the technology was developed partially? I'm not sure what. Do you understand, Mark, what this?
Maybe is referred to the fact that maybe the project ended 1 year ago. The team or the consortium progressed in the development and came out with something much more different than what was initially in the H2020 project. Partially, there needs to be a link, and this link needs to be described in the proposal. And then it will be assessed.
I think it's kind of automatic, this eligibility. If it is a project within the correct time frame and it's obviously linked, even if it's partially linked, it seems in general acceptable, it should go through. But yes, is this code purely for diagnostic? Can I apply with a therapeutic? Yes, the answer is yes. Could you quantify the impact that you're looking for to define what is understood as a strong proposal? do you have an expected total addressable market? The answer is no, we don't have a figure. And it's a very interesting question because sometimes when you think about rare diseases, there's more population that are kind of abandoned by the system. And of course, then the size of the market is not the critical factor. No, we don't have a figure. When I get this question, I tend to say, even if it's a rare disease, make the case, demonstrate is a strong case for need in this particular population. The economic, you can make the point, the economic factor is not the only factor, and the healthcare system needs help. And you can say, you know, the healthcare system will benefit economically if you tackle that problem, even if it's not a large problem. But it's true. It's always uphill when you try to help rare diseases and you talk to investors. But we don't have a figure for the market. You have to create a narrative that make it compelling, but we don't have a figure now. If you develop a sequencing workflow and data analysis model for diagnostics, but will not put this into an actual device, is it eligible? Well, this could be something to look at because it could be software, you could have algorithms, the hardware behind them. When we designed the call, hardware was a strong element because a lot of investment has gone into the hardware, and we haven't seen those technologies making it. But I don't think we preclude it, but there is a risk that it's felt as if it doesn't go in the flow of micro-bio nano, if it's just the algorithmic part. I wouldn't say no upfront, but I think you might see a little bit of negative response by some experts. I'm just anticipating. From our end, we're not banning those calls, but you have to demonstrate there is value within Micro-Nano-Bio, even though it's just the data analysis part. What other risks that reviewers find the application out of topic for the challenge, even though the proposal is about a product for life sciences? I'm not sure why this question deals with out of topic for the challenge product is for life sciences. I think eligibility in terms of the scope, I think we tend to be pro proposal, no, Marco, in general. I mean, it's rare if it touches Micro-Nano-Bio, it's rare that we should deem it not within the scope. So I'm not sure what the question.
Yeah, I think maybe is the fact that there is certain doubt where to submit, if in the EIC transition open or if to submit in the EIC transition challenge, and specific this challenge. We don't disqualify a proposal if it's not in scope with the challenge. We normally move it most of the time to open, and it might be that proposal are come to the jury member, to the jury phase, to the step 2, and the same jury member, the same panel might judge, might assess proposal that are for open or for challenges, because they were submitted in different topic, open and challenges, but are of course in the same area.
Very good, thanks. Can we apply for medical devices that require animal tests that will be used in clinical interventions? I don't think we are banning preclinical work that requires rodents, for example. Unfortunately, in some cases, you have to do some preliminary work, but there is an ethics review, so this is important for us. But we are not stopping proposals because for many medical devices, you need to do some rodent work to demonstrate it's safe, efficacy is there. But ethics part is important. You will have to go through that.
Yeah. And there might be ethics requirements that are added by the ethics assessment.
Yes, yes. Benchtop equipment for in vitro safety pharma screenings are within this challenge? Yes, as long as it incorporates elements of micro, nano, This is the main topic in the call, yes. Is it normal to see a project rejected after going through interview process and after the full financial assessment by the commission? Good question, Marco. Do you want to take that one? Have you seen projects stopped even though they were approved by the jury, but then?
No. We might, for example, put lower pre-financing. We might require, for example, more frequent reporting periods, but you might be moved from coordination to another role in the consortium if you are submitting as a consortium. And take another partner in the consortium that is stronger financially. But in my experience, I've not seen it.
Yes, and the next question about having 2, 3, or 4 partners. Yeah, I think we get this question often. I don't think there is any obvious advantage from our end. Maybe it's a case-by-case thing whether you have to evaluate if you need a partner to make the project more solid or not, but this is more common sense. EIC doesn't impose that you have more chances to be funded if you have more partners. No, clearly that's not the case. But you have to see in your project if you need a partner because you're missing some bits, access to market or technologically. This is just common sense. What return is expected from technologies developed in Switzerland and the startup will be incorporated there? Good question. Can we? I don't think we can support at this moment.
Well, the question is complex in the sense that entities incorporated in Switzerland can participate to our projects as associated partner, even if the country is not associated to Horizon Europe. Associated entity means that will not receive funding. However, the proposal will go against the spirit of the work program if we are funding. In that case, we would be funding the exploitation for the benefit of a company incorporated in Switzerland. So the exploitation and the exploitation partner should be established in eligible country, member state or associated country.
Very good. Can you pitch your TPOC, whether it is worth to submit? Whom can you contact? Oh, I see. Okay. I think this question is about, can we be contacted with a specific idea to see if it's worth submitting it? Well, we cannot offer that sort of check from our end, partly because operational is not possible, and partly because it's better to have the external experts do that evaluation. And then our thoughts might not be aligned with the experts of the experts. So we don't typically do that systematically. What I do is, if there is a question of being in a scope or not being in scope, then I can help a little bit. I can say, look, when the call was designed, this is what we had in mind, and this is what we will tell the experts during the info day for the expert evaluators and for the jury members. That I can share with you. But not really looking at specific proposal and deciding, yeah, it's worth submitting, it's very good. No, we cannot go into those details. No, but a general in scope or non-scope, I think that makes sense, and we do that.
I want to add to that what Enrique is saying. I think for this you should contact your national contact point.
Very good idea.
They can help you with that.
Absolutely.
But Enrique cannot, because first of all, he would say things to one beneficiary and not to others. So that would create an unfair situation for some organizations. And he is also just one person, already very busy. So he can also not answer thousands of questions in this direction. So it's not possible to contact him, but your national contact point will know the answer. And if the national contact point doesn't know the answer, then the national contact point will ask Enrique, and you will get an answer that way. But you cannot contact any of the program managers directly, because it would be really unfair to the people who don't do that, and then some might get some privileged information, and which is the situation that we really do not want.
And it gets to us anyway, as Anne-Marie was saying. If you contact the NCP and the NCP is not sure, the NCP contacts us. So don't worry, you will get your answer either directly from the NCP or from us. Thanks, Anne-Marie. If you have an ERC POC project that is within a challenge scope, would it be potentially better to head for challenge or open call, since POC enables open call? Yeah, I'm not sure whether the question is about success rate. I don't see why. What do you think, Marco? Is there a take on this?
Yeah, I can say that the success rate of a challenge is normally identical or higher than an open, or lower. It depends if the project has been, if the amount of proposal submitted for challenges, for challenge scope is lower or higher than in open. So far, what we have seen is that there were fewer proposal submitted in challenges that in open. So therefore, the success rate for challenges was slightly higher. But still, you still need to reach the minimum threshold for each criteria in the first step to reach the interview phase. And then at the interview phase, there will be no difference essentially, because there is no ranking. It's just go or no go. So I would not take this. I would not make this calculation, and I would submit to challenges if the proposal is scope to challenges.
Very good. Yes. Thank you. If you're not associated with Horizon 2020 but reside in Europe, are you able to submit? Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. You have to have a project that's within Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe. So I'm not sure. Do you understand the question, Marco? Maybe I'm missing the.
I don't understand it either.
You have to have a European Commission funded project within Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe, and then you can apply to transition.
Or you might contact someone who owns a result from a H2020
yes,
project,
exactly,
as it was discussed presented by Enrique,
yes, of course.
And establish a relation, and then together with the proposal, you will need to submit this commitment letter that is part of the application, yes, where the owner of the results committed to negotiate with you access to the results.
Yes, yes. So maybe the question then, it was put forward by somebody who lives in Europe, but who has a nationality of a non-associated country. I'm not sure if this is, but then.
If that's the case, you need to, if you reside in Europe, then you're eligible for H2020. It's not a matter of nationality.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very good. Thanks for that, Marco. I think that was the last question. Thanks so much, everyone. Maybe Anne-Marie wants to wrap up. And thanks, Marco, again, for all your help.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I just want to thank also Enrique and Marco for their good presentation. I want to thank the audience for their many questions. There were very good questions. I think that helps to understand further what this transition challenge is about. And Now we hope that you will apply to the call, of course. So please prepare your proposals. And when you have questions, remember to contact your national contact point for that. They know all the answer. Or re-watch this video and also the presentation, because there's already a lot of information in the presentation. Thank you very much and have a nice evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.